I know we're wrapping the last round of facade grant program awards, and I have some thoughts on improving the program, but I don't wanna necessarily start with like what to improve. I kinda wanna start with what's been the timeline, and is that timeline working? I think it would be good to build the timeline that we want to have for this year, and then make, like, schedule our actions and our discussions around like how quickly we need to achieve things to stick to our timeline, to make sure that we're awarding people, you know, in a timely manner, and that we're in the budget year that things need to be in. So all that to say, can we start with just what's the timeline historically for the facade grant program, or do we need to establish one?
So this past year it was a little bit different, which is the one that I've been involved in, because of the staffing change.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just kind of tried to do it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
As far as previous years, do you know what has usually been?
I think the money previously had to be expended by the end of May, but they've extended that through the end of June, I believe.
For this one.
With this year.
Because of that. So I think it's kind of based on what you all are wanting to do, especially since we're gonna go through it and try to hammer out the details of some changes that might benefit the town.
Okay.
Um,
Did the funds need to be extended within this fiscal
I
year?
think it's actually by June first is when, I think it used to be May 1st. I'm sure that's correct.
Okay. And is that because the funds need to be expended within that fiscal year?
I think the thought is that if they were submitted by the 1st of June, that would still give us time to have it included in that fiscal year, coded and included in that fiscal year budget.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, in all honesty, if you extended that to like the 15th or something, you'd, probably be okay.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay, so I would like to work backwards from that timeline. We don't necessarily, I guess, need to do that at this meeting, but I would like to have a timeline that we stick to each year of when the applications open, how long that period of accepting them is, how long the review period is, the announcement. Like, I would like all of those milestone activities organized and just some kind of like a plan of action that follows the timeline, so that we are sticking with that. And we can obviously extend things as needed, but I would really like us to have a timeline of like, these are the deadlines, the milestones for this program. And I would like to make sure that in those milestones that the businesses have like at least 6 months, and I think, is that what's on the website, 6 months to complete the projects?
So the applications were supposed to be due September 30th of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
And then they needed to have the work completed by June 1st, 2025.
Got it.
So 6 months.
So if we work backwards from 6 months to between award, so awarding them by, January 1? Is that full 6 months, or does it have to be December 1? December 1? You know what I mean?
You could sort of change the program timeline so that you make the award at the end of the year, but it would actually be for the next fiscal year.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanted to handle it that way.
Is there benefit to doing that?
You'd be giving them a longer period of time if you give them a whole fiscal year to do it.
Which it seems like in past experience, many of them have needed
More than
more
6 months?
time, right? I mean, it seems like a lot of times they are slow to the gate.
6 months is a tight time frame when you consider half of it's winter.
Right.
So
Yeah,
Right.
that's fair. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
So, is that something you guys can work on for the next meeting? Maybe we can pass it by email so we can think about it before. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Let's think about a timeline that gives business owners the max amount of time to access the funds, but gives us enough time to review, make comments, one thing I'd like to see considered is, technical assistance for applicants. Do we do that?
We do, and, some of that would be like the, drawing that's done by the artist,
Okay.
the rendering.
That's what I was wondering. I wasn't sure if we did technical assistance, but if we could do like, yeah, design consultations and support, it sounds like we already are. And I don't know if there's any sort of like a workshop for folks who are interested. I don't wanna pile on a bunch of work. Maybe that's not worth it. Maybe there's not enough interest, but, if there's like a way to provide the businesses with information about like, here's what to expect, here's how it works, like you're not gonna be in this alone, like we want you to have an opportunity to feel comfortable with the process, brainstorm what those ideas might be, we have technical assistance and really lay the process out. And maybe it already exists in some other communication.
No, I think that is a great idea. Miles and I have talked about that, and I think he can really help with that. I
Mhm.
think, when you're talking about technical assistance, you know, he's not gonna create the renderings, but this is a person that, as long as we keep him looped in on these meetings and the process, he's already having so much direct contact and communication with our local businesses. And I wasn't a part of the process before this, but just hearing about who we have awarded them to and that those were the best applicants, it made me wonder if now with Miles already building such strong relationships, if we couldn't have a better pool of applicants, that are local, more local businesses in the way that I think the program was intended to help, with bringing him into the conversation.
Yeah.
And doing a different way of marketing from my department's end and how we're reaching potential businesses to take advantage of it. Because I just think there are more people that we could be reaching if they better understood and maybe it was simplified a little bit for them, and Miles can do that.
Yeah.
So.
I like that.
They could stand a little guidance on their applications, because a few of them submitted
Yeah.
things that weren't, at least elements that were eligible and things like that, like paving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to see us create, because like looking at the application, I mean, we definitely, it needs an update, there's not a question there that asks them to confirm that they meet the eligibility criteria, which I think the eligibility criteria is okay. And I don't necessarily have any changes to that, but like, I don't think the application asks them to confirm the eligibility criteria straight out the gate. So what work is our staff having to do to go back and verify that they're eligible and they fit the criteria? So if we ask them those questions on the application and we provide them like an application packet that summarizes whatever might be in that workshop or that communication to say, here's what's eligible, here's the type of work you can request, here's how to make your application strong, and explain to them how we're going to score it, which we'll talk about next. But I think it just sets people up for the most success, especially because these are probably small business owners who don't really know how to approach this, or even what to think of when they're trying to design their facade.
And once you all decide how the program's gonna look, we can go to town with that. We can make that very easy to read and digestible, and
Self-explanatory.
yes,
Right.
Because a lot of
yes.
them did disqualify themselves
Yeah.
Right.
because they did the work prior to
Right.
applying.
Yeah.
And so, that.
Yeah.
We could do a good job of explaining that.
Yeah.
I know that we can.
Yes.
And especially if we take those lessons learned.
Yeah. I think go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, and if there's a certain criteria that they need to meet as far as the age of the building,
Right.
because right now it's 50 years.
Right.
We went back and made sure that that building fit into that. However, one of them, when we did that, said that it was 50 years old, but it wasn't specifically that building that was 50 years old. There was something there, and Stacy Martin knew it because he was on the selection committee.
Right.
He knew that, but nobody else you probably would have known. But
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's something that's not general knowledge that somebody would normally
Right.
know off the top of their head.
I think the more we treat this as like a traditional grant, the better off I think we're going to be in sort of what the outreach looks like. And I remember Andrew and I talking about, the application needs to, require that they submit a budget, and, itemize what it is, the work that they're doing and, looking through what's eligible. So So, I mean, really spelling that out in terms of, you know, required attachments and having a pre-workshop, you know, all of these things that, again, they just don't, this is not their, if, you know, in looking at it like it's a grant, that's, most small business owners don't know how to do that or haven't before, so,
Yep.
you know, I think we just need to treat it like that, but, you know, kind of walk them through that process, and create these attachments and require documentation.
And on that line, I think we need to develop some strong scoring criteria, and we need to consider that there will be applications who maybe are eligible but just don't score highly on like the criteria that we're scoring, right? There's a list of things that we're looking for on the website, the types of projects that are eligible, like, and there's a list of objectives that we want to accomplish with the program. And I think we need to align the scoring of the applications with our objectives. And those applications that are really strongly meeting our objectives for the program, score those higher, right? With a specific number value of meeting or exceeding or not meeting those expectations, like that align with our objectives. And if they don't score a certain score, then we don't consider them for funding because they're not aligned to our objectives. Their projects might be just fine, but if they're not aligning to our objectives of what the facade grant program is for, like the purpose of the program, then they just don't score enough. You know, there's a threshold of scoring and you've gotta meet and exceed this threshold. And that's what the workshops will help them do, is to bring to us something that, you know, an application that helps them meet the purpose of the grant. Does that make sense? And then when everyone is scoring, we can score them individually, tally those scores and pull whatever that number is. I mean, and then it's very straightforward. Who did the best?
Right.
If they are at a certain threshold, maybe there's a certain amount of funding that they receive, or maybe if they meet this threshold, then they receive whatever it is they're requesting, whatever that might be. But I think it would help us do a better job of choosing who receives a grant, and the people applying for the grant do a better job of writing an application that meets our expectations. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that is what I would like to see us do. Better, like, updated form with a complete application package. That's the piece for the business owners, and then internally, some scoring mechanisms, which I've got some brainstormed ideas, but if you guys wanna take that, I can share ideas, and then maybe you guys can pull together the score sheet, and we can just make sure all those things align. Does that sound?
Yeah, and I think we can take, I mean, there's the score sheet, the rubric that we've used in the past, I think it definitely needs some revisions, but there's some pieces of it I think that can remain intact too, from my memory of it, so if we can update that document as a starting point, I think then we can see what else we need to include at that point.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
And then, and then another question I have is, do we do a post-award feedback form? Do you know? And I guess what I mean by that is, like, after the award is over, whether they did or didn't do the work, we follow up after the period of performance is over and ask them, you know, did you accomplish the work? If not, why not? Like, just to learn a little bit more about if they didn't accomplish their work, was it because they ran out of time? Did they have unanticipated, like, budget impacts? You know what I mean?
We did that with Launch Christians
Yeah.
but I'm not sure if you all did that with a facade grant. But we're happy to create something for you.
I mean, it doesn't have to be overly complicated, but
Sure.
it would be nice to hear from the folks who have had a facade grant and completed the work and haven't completed the work, because I think their feedback could help us improve the program, and make some changes to the timeline and
Yeah.
the guidance that we give them, and we would know what was helpful for them. But, you know, we make that a requirement of, if you do receive a grant, then you also agree to do this, like, I don't know what the word is, like, exit interview.
Survey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exit survey of administering the grant.
Sure, and that's how we did it with Launch Christiansburg. I think that it was required
So we did a
beginning,
course
middle.
beginning. We did like some milestones in the middle, and then we had a final survey that was like about the course material and the process. And then co-starters who we did the course through, they had an exit survey after the pitch and everything was completed.
But was
and
something required? Like, did we say you can't do this until you complete the survey, or am I making
I
that
mean,
up?
we required them at that last meeting to
Okay.
complete the survey.
So, like, in person,
They couldn't
yeah.
leave until they completed it.
No, we can include that on the application, like by signing here, you agree to blah, 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 and complete a post-award survey
Yeah.
if awarded.
Yeah.
We did have that on Launch Christiansburg where they agreed by participating in the program that they did a survey like up to 3 years
Sure.
after the program. So like a year post, 2 years post, and 3 years post.
Yeah. So, Rheta, if you guys wanna include that on the application, then we can work on a survey and create it for you.
Does all of this make sense? Like, do you see how this is coming, like, I see in my mind how I think it could come together, but does this make sense? Is this,
Mhm.
okay, what gaps are we leaving with adjusting these things? I think updating eligibility criteria could be a potential
Yeah.
gap.
I think on the front end, you know, the part about education and promotion is gonna be huge, just because I think in years past, the small pool of applicants has been in part because I think a lot of small businesses just don't think that, this is not for me, you know, well, I think mostly just like the eligibility piece, right? They just don't realize that they could actually apply for it in the first place.
Right.
So if we can really hone in on that, then I think we're gonna see those numbers go up drastically. So it's just that
Do
education
we
piece.
spotlight the businesses that we award the grants to, like in our newsletter or whatever, when they complete their projects, hey, this business was, you know, awarded a facade grant, we
No,
spotlight the work they've
because-
done.
But we did with what was the Chandlery?
We didn't.
Or we did and
They
then
were-
we didn't,
They were on the
right?
advertisement for the.
Okay,
We didn't.
okay.
It's not like them, but like had a picture
Okay.
of like an example of that.
So there have been feelings, it is very, very complicated how we work with businesses but aren't advertising for businesses or showing.
No, that
product.
makes sense.
So when we were advertising for the facade grant, not this go round because we weren't pulled in the communication as much. I think some things just fell through the cracks because we had 2 key people that were involved in it that left. So the timing, you know,
Yeah,
we
I
they did what they could do. And but before that, there was a lot of conversation around some of the marketing materials that my department created because we wanted to show examples of the businesses, some of the businesses that had benefited. So we put
Right.
together, I did a video
Yeah,
that
yeah.
showed all of the,
I remember that.
and I think most of the places who had benefited. And then we did a postcard that showed multiple places that had benefited, and we sent them out to business owners who we thought would be eligible for future. But there was some frustrations expressed because it was felt that we shouldn't be highlighting specific businesses, but we can't show the work that was done without showing the business.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I personally felt like it was okay, and we ended up doing it.
Right.
And it was fine, but that is just a little history.
Well, and it's
on-
not some, my thought was not so much focused on the business, but focused on their experience with the facade grant program, showing what they were able to accomplish by working with us for that, and then, you know, like you talked about how they agreed to do a post-grant interview or whatever, just kind of including that and whatever. they
Maybe
did.
just a
So
quote
you're
or
showing that
something.
project.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Or specific, like if we're able to take pictures, I don't wanna get into the weeds, but take pictures of the work.
You know, I mean,
That highlights
I wouldn't be
the
too worried. I mean, I think, you know, like showing is telling here, and I think you wanna have, to some degree, you wanna have video or pictures or something, right, that is gonna say, here's what this money can help you
Right.
accomplish.
Here's the
Almost like
before and
another
after.
benefit of,
So,
of
Yeah,
applying.
And
yeah.
that's something we had talked about too, before and after.
Right.
We haven't done that in our marketing, cause I've only been here one, besides last year, which I don't count, but the one kind of cycle of the facade grant. But we had talked about showing before and after, so if, you know, this was, the Chandlery
Mhm.
before, and this was
Yeah.
what it looks
Yeah.
like being part of the facade grant. so.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah.
But as long as we have the support of this committee, then I'll do
Yeah.
whatever you want.
No, I mean, I think that's gonna be compelling to see, you know, for folks to be able to say, okay, this is what I can do.
Sure.
So,
I like
Okay.
that.
yeah.
And I would like to see so many people interested in this, that it's a competitive process, but like, I do think we need to be wary of a budget limit and recognize that the people that score the highest are the ones who are awarded, because if that's how any other
Mhm.
grant process would be, there's a limitation, it's competitive, and the better that you, like, the more effort you put into your application, the better of a chance you have to be awarded, and we choose the top however many, like we said, a limit, I mean, maybe we work with council in the work session to determine what the limit is. Not that I wanna limit how many people get it, but we can't award, I want 20 places to apply, we can't award 20
We
places.
sort of been budgetary, we've always budgeted 25,000.
Okay,
Mhm.
So, basically 5 would be the max
right,
you'd be looking at awarding.
yeah,
Right.
and I noticed that it says up to $4,500 on the application. It used to be
Unless-
5,000?
It is
Unless,
still
of course, unless you awarded lower amounts, then you could potentially fund more
Yeah.
than 5.
I mean, am I crazy? Does the
No,
application
so
say
it
5,000?
should have had another box, that says that they could apply for up to 5,000. It didn't have that option.
Okay,
Well, and in the interest of also expanding to get as many applicants as possible, I think you want to also look at the eligibility, and it should be any property owner in in Cambria, in downtown, whatever whatever the
Mhm,
case
that's
may
right.
be.
But we expanded the facade grant program
Right,
that's
to
to
all
all Christians.
Christiansburg, yeah.
yeah,
Which I do think is still the right move. I mean, this is probably something that's good for work session, but
mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about any property owner, so not just businesses. I'm
Mhm.
talking about nonprofits, I'm talking
Yeah.
about, so.
Single family house.
Single, yeah. I mean, I think you need to make it as universal. If you own a property, then you are eligible, is what I'm thinking.
I think if the property is located especially in the central business district, we want those facades improved, right?
Right.
If the goal of the program is to improve the facades of downtown businesses and Cambria and older buildings in Christiansburg, then, I mean, I don't think, I don't want it to be a residential building, but like a business that owns that building, I think is eligible.
But what you said was single family homes.
There's technically a few single family homes in the central business district.
But that's
where there's
considered
like a-
residential, so you're saying no to that.
Well, I can be swayed. I just wanna come back to the purpose of the grant. If the purpose is to beautify downtown in Cambria and also help the older buildings in Christiansburg, then how can we write this facade grant program so that it does that? And is it bad to exclude residences? I mean, maybe not. I guess I'm open for like a discussion about it. I don't know that I feel one way or the other yet right
I
now.
think it also depends on the historic value of the property too.
Mhm.
You know,
And if we're focusing on like certain areas, which if it's downtown in Cambria, because right now it's open to all of Christiansburg.
Mhm.
Probably the intent behind that was so that residents in a neighborhood wouldn't apply for a grant for their home.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking, I mean, the residents, there's the one residence downtown, right? There's.
Well, if you look at the whole, I guess, of the area that was previously mapped as the central business district,
Mhm.
which went all the way over to Depot Street and to First Street.
Right,
There's the Dr. Smith House on West Main Street. As you go past the square on the left, it's kind of mid-block, it's that
Right.
white house.
next to the
Really-
bank,
really- Yes,
Yeah,
next to the
yeah.
bank building, that's a single family house.
that's the only one I can think
Well,
of.
you've got over on, Shelton Street, you've got a few single family, like behind the
Okay.
fire department and the library,
Okay,
in that area, you've got a few single families.
okay.
Could it
So, I mean,
be,
there's a few in there.
could it be phases? Like, the goal of the program is to grow and expand, and maybe if you wanted to go the route of residential properties in those areas, that could be a secondary phase after the priority is given to businesses and nonprofits.
Could be. And maybe if we're scoring these, we score downtown for-profit business as the highest, and nonprofit business, we score not necessarily that we need to score like one or the other, but you know what I'm saying, like, if our priority is the for-profit business, then it gets a higher score, or if our priority is not the residences, but it's in downtown and we wanna beautify downtown, then it just gets a lower score, cause it's not our priority, but it does align with
Right.
the purpose of the grant, so, you know what I'm saying, like, I think there's ways to reflect
I mean,
in the scoring.
and I think this is where all the other criteria comes into play of, you know, what is the historic significance of the building, where is it located, how visible is it, right,
Mhm.
all of those things.
Yeah,
Taking the priority of that assessment, basically, when we go to adjudicate.
and I'm also curious if council at the work session, something I'd like to bring up is, the 50-year, minimum age of the building, if we wanna go a little bit younger. I don't know what the shape of the, like, buildings is, you know, like 30 years and.
What was it before we
older.
changed, what was it before 50?
There was a,
There
Was
was
it an
one?
age limit?
Okay,
it was bound by the districts, by the
okay,
Mhm.
so
Cambria
it
and,
didn't matter the age of the building,
Right.
if it was in the district.
correct, it had to have been either in Cambria or downtown as defined by that map.
Right.
The two maps are.
Okay,
So maybe we just consider, like, do we still need an age limit? And if so, is there some room for adjustment? Because a 40-year-old building could be in real need of facade update.
right.
So. Can you guys just talk outside of the room if you're gonna discuss? The whispering is really distracting.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else, or any other things we wanna keep in mind for the work session that we wanna bring up to council?
Pertaining to facade grant or other, we're talking?
Facade grant.
I think that.
Subway, I'm not sure who mentioned this, someone mentioned this, but I know that's a winner, right?
Right.
Was there, is there any discussion on that, like if that, if you want that to be
I mean, that might be something, like,
at the work session, like I know it's like a privately, or a franchise
private
Yeah,
owner,
it's
right.
right, so.
Yeah.
right, and that might be something to discuss, how is that different than a small business? In
Well,
terms of,
is this for small business? I'm sorry to interrupt
no,
you.
you're good, what'd you say?
Is it for small business?
Well, right,
Which you can do that, you can make that part of the criteria, the scoring criteria, if you
Mhm.
wanna say, you know,
right,
franchise businesses might get a lower consideration.
Yeah, that's true.
yeah,
I mean, I just wanna keep in mind, like, I think the Subway is locally owned. Like, has a local owner.
Yeah, so I know that Subway usually has a local owner that,
Right.
because it is one of the franchise. And I know the owner of the actual building is local.
and do we currently ask for proof of ownership on buildings in the application?
Well, we
Yeah,
do
the
ask
owner's
them to list, like,
signature.
the property
Okay.
owner has to sign, I guess.
Cause that would be a great example of like verifying that it's a local owner,
What-
You know,
what-
rather
what
than
are
the corporation.
signature lines is for the property
Right.
owner?
yeah. I think but more in the signature, I think the proof of ownership might, you know, help out in the event it is something like a Subway building, just to make sure. That way we can justify that, you know, if that comes up as a question.
And if you all want to maybe look over the criteria of what type of work can be done with the grant, and see if those are things you want to continue. I know landscaping was brought up as
Right.
something that they didn't really know if we wanna continue with, and signage, I know we don't fund signage, unless it's the restoration of historic tenant signage.
Right.
So, if you have ideas, you can
Okay.
send those to me and
And what about for the upcoming work session? Do you think that you all might have enough time to put just together a couple quick reminder slides of like what is on the eligibility or eligibility criteria, what is and allowed expense under the grant. Just a couple of like level setting things, so when we go talk about it with council, we just start with here's what's allowed and here's what the criteria are, and then we can talk about how we wanna adjust from there.
Yeah.
Is that okay. What else? So, action items, I guess, just thinking about the facade grant, we're gonna work on a timeline that increases the amount of time for the business owners to actually take care of those facade programs or projects. And then we're gonna pull together the slide deck for the work session. There's a couple of items for communications and workshops and providing information about technical assistance. And then, I guess, based on what comes out of the work session, then we can update any of our priorities for the program. And that's gonna help us determine our scoring mechanisms, and then any updates to the application. Great, that's everything.
Yeah.
And then we can also just remind them that $25,000 is the current budget and ask if they wanna make any changes to that. And I think that'll give us really good direction, so in March, we can pull it all together. Sound good?
So March is our goal to have it all together.
Yeah, and to be fair, that if that's too aggressive, I understand. We'll also, I guess, need to just work with whatever the timeline is. So at least by our March meeting, we're gonna have a foundation of information to start with, because council will have talked about these criteria and helped us make some decisions about what they'd like to see.
Okay.
And then I think then it's our job to come back and pull together a program that executes that.
So in March, we might be able to set some deadlines.
And then we can commit to whatever our timeline will be, and then make sure we get the program materials, and then hit the ground and start advertising. Okay, anything else on facade grant program discussion? It's timely that we're gonna talk about it in the work session, I think that'll be good. Anything? Okay, alright, any other items for the group?
One other thing, when we were brainstorming kind of the list of things for this group to talk about, I was curious the relationship with like DCI and what that's been like historically and how that will look moving forward, and if there are any other nonprofit groups that are downtown and or Cambria specific that the group would work with moving forward.
That's a good question. Well, can you give us any insight on what the partnership has or has not been with other like downtown groups like DCI and this committee?
Has DCI ever been to these meetings since you've been here?
One person, when the first meeting that I came to, we walked downtown and kind of like took an inventory of what was available, what are things that could improve, and there was some, the woman who runs the yoga,
Chris?
Oh, of course, yeah.
she came to that one, but then after that, no.
Okay. I think it makes sense for this group to connect with other downtown interested groups or Cambria interested groups. I don't know what that should look like right now.
Or maybe we start with Miles, you know, looking more into what those connections look like, and then maybe on an as-needed basis, bringing them in. I don't know. I mean, there are a number of groups I think that could be relevant to some of the conversations we're having, but I don't know. Like DCI, for example, I don't know what their true status is right now. But that's a great, like, in terms of communications, right, Miles, that's a great thing for you to, you know, sort of bring back and say, okay, well, here's where they're at, and here's maybe how we can work together as a committee. I don't know if it's needed on a regular basis, but Miles might help us inform what that conversation looks
Yeah.
like.
And there probably is some connections to make if we're interested in doing something like the Main Street program. You know, we can't, like DCI doesn't owe it to us to let us like have oversight of their program. But if we're going to try to pursue something like the Main Street program, I know we need to establish some connections and some partnerships, and we need to make sure that like they're taking care of all the things that they need to take care of in order to be eligible for those things. So I think there's some sort of opportunity there, but I just don't know what it is yet.
Would you all feel comfortable with Miles sort of, initiating a conversation with DCI specifically, just to
Absolutely.
kinda see what's going on, where they're
Yeah.
at, and then kind of bringing that back next meeting, and then we can talk
Mhm.
about it a little further, and maybe this is just sort of an ongoing, like we said
Yeah.
before, conversation to see how this committee specifically works
Right.
with other nonprofits. Is there anyone else besides DCI that you all know of, or Randy you know of? There's no one I know of.
You know, I guess you could say the Chamber of Commerce is, interested in all businesses in town. We don't have anything like the Blacksburg Partnership per se.
Sure.
You know, there's not like a business association.
Or like a Cambria
You know,
specific?
I guess, no, there's nothing Cambria specific that I know of, you know, let's just say like church groups or something. You know, I guess townwide, you know, Home Builders Association is a county-wide organization. But, you know, like I say, I think outside of DCI and the chamber, that's probably it.
I mean, I do think it makes sense for this committee to have a piece of, or like have a part of, the Main Street program,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, so I think that's a good, to our original conversation of that running list, Main Street program should just be another tracking item that we have.
Yeah.
So on that list, I have art and beautification, farmers market structure, facade grant, launch Christiansburg, generating businesses downtown, passenger rail, special events committee, MC 250, comprehensive plan, placemaking plan, Main Street. Did I miss anything?
I think that's a lot.
Oh, wait.
Solving the world's problems.
Right, right.
Mural arts,
See, I'm sorry.
mural
Mural,
and
okay.
arts, the
This just means
Public Arts Advisory.
Public Arts Advisory
Yeah.
Board.
there are a lot of opportunities for this committee to do stuff
Yeah,
downtown. So
right.
we can pull, if we can organize these into some specific targeted goals and thoughts, and just keep a pulse on what's happening, I think we can do some good stuff.
Do you need anything for public arts for the mural conversation before our next meeting?
No, we just need to circle back with property owner and, yeah. There's more discussion to be had there. I do think, I mean, we talk a lot about downtown, and obviously I know Cambria has been something we've, you know, in recent years added to the mix, but like, particularly with passenger rail, I just would love for us to make sure we, you know, I don't know if we have, you know, like, what's his name, Ken Vaughn, is it at the bookstore, across from the depot, you know, if you have like a Cambria champion that can also, which Miles, you know, you could be directly involved in that as well, right? Just to have like an ear to the ground on what's happening with the development and the ripples around the station. So I know Cambria, I would love for this committee to also have a very close eye on.
Yeah. Do we have a representative kind of from the Cambria area who's on the facade grant committee? Maybe we could
That's a
invite
good
him
idea.
to,
Yeah,
you know
I
what
think he
mean?
would do it too.
I think that would be
Yeah.
nice. I don't have a relationship with him, but maybe we could invite him.
I don't, is that, you know the owner of the NRV, what is it, New River Valley?
Old
Old
River
book?
Books.
Yeah, that, right.
Heather.
Heather Vaughn, right? Isn't it a couple?
I can't think
I
of the last
think-
name right. But it's the two of them.
Okay,
Yeah, I have
yeah.
both their
You wanted
contact
to-
info.
And they've been really community minded from what I've seen, so
They
they
are.
might absolutely wanna be more involved in something like this, particularly when it's happening right outside their front window,
Mm-hmm.
so. Yeah,
And as far as the facade selection committee, I don't know if it's changed every year, but, I know that Paula Alston was on it, and Stacy Martin, and Ashley Hill. So I don't know if that'll be something you wanna continue on with that group of people, if they're willing, or if you want
Yeah.
to come up with a new set to.
I'd love to see if they are willing to come back and add a couple more people, maybe potentially from Cambria, and, you know, just make it a little more well-rounded, but those three were great. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, if they're willing, that'd be great.
Mhm.
Bless you.
Alright. Okay, so I think at least for this committee, our big thing we need to settle is the facade grant program. Work session's gonna help a lot with that. Then, once the facade grant program is settled, the materials look good and we're ready to roll that out, then I think it's just looking at this list and choosing what's the next focus for us.
Yeah.